Welcome everyone to episode 309 of Just Joshing, live from Vancouver, British Columbia. I am your host, Joshua Pendelarosco. I write stuff and podcasts too. Today, Angela Ackerman joins the podcast. This is my first episode in Vancouver. Honestly, so 4 days in, I'm literally 4 days into Vancouver. My impressions are as follows. First off, it's a cool place. Very, very cool place. I've never been in a big city where I felt so encouraged to be out and about and wander. It's an amazing, cool place. It's got a really, really cool personality to it. It reminds me of some of the cities I've lived in the past, but it's kind of got its own vibe. It's new. It feels alive, which I think is something in comparison to Calgary. Calgary, in comparison, is very, very, doesn't feel this energetic ever. It's kind of one of those situations where I'm kind of like, I'm always wanting to be awake, which that's going to take some used to. Yeah, it doesn't really feel like it's fast paced in comparison to Toronto. It just kind of has its own culture and its own rules, which is kind of a really cool thing. But anyway, it's been great so far. Things are about to get interesting. Like I said, this is the time I start taking chances and start going for things. But I digress. Let's get to our conversation, shall we, with Angela Ackerman.
This episode of Just Joshing is sponsored by Indie Imprint. Indie Imprint supports creators by creators. Whether you are writing a book or creating a video game, Indie Imprint works with its clients to produce, edit, and present their projects to the world. For more information, check out their website at www.indieimprint.com.
So now the official recorder's on. So I usually ask this question, so we'll start here. If you have anything incriminating you'd like to admit, make it good.
Say that one more time?
If you have anything incriminating that you've been up to, make it good.
Sadly, I have not done anything incriminating lately. Lately, you know, I try to keep it on the down low. I don't try to advertise that kind of stuff on social media. Keep all the bodies nicely buried in all the bodies buried in my backyard, that sort of thing.
I never leave your business too close to home, I say. But that's me. That's a personal thing. We'll leave it at that. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm feeling very relaxed this morning. I had a really good first interview, and you're my second interview today, and I feel like you're someone I've wanted to chat with because I've never crossed paths with you in person, but I hear about you all the time.
Well, hopefully it's good stuff and not like something disturbing.
Well, a little bit of nefariousness here and there, but nothing too severe. Actually, honestly, you are probably highly recommended from a lot of authors because of your Thesauruses, which is, I think, a really, really cool thing. You've helped a lot of people out, me included, so thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's good to hear.
Yeah, so that's your reputation from afar. But I was hoping, get this opportunity now that we're kind of close, or as close as the computer screens allow us to be, that maybe get to know you a little bit better, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I'm going to assume, and this is just my assumption, that your original master plan involved fiction. Am I right with this?
It totally did. Yes, it totally did. This whole thing has been like a jog in the path, where you're going one direction and then something happens and you're like, holy cow, maybe this is something else that I'm meant to be doing as well. So, yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Well, my entire career, both writing and podcasting, is an accident. I can totally embrace the possibility of you just stumbling into things. That's how I seem to work. It works out for some strange reason, though. So that's what I found.
I think it takes us time too to figure out, where our navigation is. Where we're always learning more about ourselves as we go along in life, and as we pursue certain goals, we recognize different talents that maybe we didn't suspect that we had before. So I think it's kind of fun. I like the idea that there's mystery to our lives, and that maybe this is the pantser that comes out in me a little bit. But it's nice to not have everything all in a nice little outline that we have to follow in life. It's good to be able to flex a little bit and explore. So I like that.
So there's a joke I read, if I remember, from Babylon 5, and I've always kept it. It's like, how do you make God laugh?
How?
How do you make God laugh?
How?
You tell him your plans.
You tell him your plans. Yeah, no kidding. That's so true.
Yeah, no, that's how you make God laugh, because...
Yeah. Hold my beer.
Yeah, it's like, hold my beer. I got this. I'll figure it out. And all of a sudden, it's like, really? And the straight and narrow roadmap you thought you plotted is a giant, like, maze, a labyrinth of chaos and mayhem. And that's pretty much what I found. I've learned, I think the most important thing, honestly, is keeping an open mind. Because I think when you let yourself have an open mind, you see possibilities you wouldn't normally do. Like, I accidentally started this podcast. I accidentally got published. And that's all because I just let myself be open to those possibilities. So I've learned that, there's two kinds of accidents. One of them is chocolate chip cookies. Someone accidentally put chocolate chips in the cookie dough, and the rest is history. There's the other kind of accidents too, and they come with it. But I mean, it's important to look for the chocolate chips in the cookies. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I definitely think that life is about analyzing what's going on and looking for opportunities. I think it's also about always keeping yourself open to learning new things. People that sort of close themselves off from, they believe, well, I'm on this path, I can only learn about these things, or, anything else is a waste of time, I need to focus my attention here. You're kind of limiting yourself. So opening your mind to learning new things, I mean, like I said, you might discover that you're really good at something that you previously didn't even consider that could be a possibility for you. So, and two, I think there's just a real pleasure in learning.
Absolutely. It
always facilitates growth. So that's something that I think we all are that's really our goal at the end of the day, is to grow and become someone better and more capable
and more independent, and maybe
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, more independent, possibly a rock star. I mean, that's kind of the secret hope there. But it's one of those things I've learned in life that our biggest limiters are often ourselves. And because of that, the important thing to recognize is, when I won the Aurora last year for the podcast, I asked myself, how did I get here? Right? And the second question I asked was, what am I doing that would stop me from getting back here again? And I've made a conscious effort in the last year to try and minimize as much of the second part as I possibly could. And one of the things I just learned is, honestly, it's just being open to the possibility of anything. We're basically talking about the same thing, just being open. And you learn an incredible amount, and you get access to all kinds of different things just by being open and trying new things.
Yeah. And I think that's a good mindset, too, for anyone who's seeking traditional publishing, because you can get very discouraged. It can be really hard to go down that path, and traditionally there is a lot of no's that are involved, and it's easy to sort of feel like, why am I doing this? I'm not good enough. And you have to kind of flip the script on yourself and go, okay, you know what? I need to change the way I'm asking questions. And instead of thinking about how, internalizing feedback that I'm getting that I'm not good enough, that this isn't right, I need to instead think about, okay, what more can I be doing to ensure that I will succeed? And what can I focus on that I actually have control over versus things that I have no control over? Because you have no control over whether or not an editor is going to love your book or not. You have no control over whether or not an agent is going to read something quickly or not, or if they're going to give you personalized feedback or not, if they're going to make an offer or not. You don't have control over those things. But what you do have control over is making sure that your craft is very strong. You do have control over your research, making sure that you're targeting the right agent, the right editor, that you understand what a query letter should look like, that you're doing everything possible to improve your chances of getting those yeses. Those are all things that are in your control. And I think for me, when I figured that out, when that light switch went on in my brain, it allowed me to sort of let go of those feelings of feeling like I wasn't good enough, and instead just going, you know what, I'm not going to care about that stuff that I have no control over. I'm going to start focusing my energy where it really is going to help me most, and that is preparing myself so that my work, my product, my career letters, my research, everything is as best as I possibly can make it to increase those opportunities that are going to come my way, to increase the chances that I'm going to get that yes.
Well, I have 8 rules to success. The 4th rule is the rain will fall, the rest is rain. And the reason I call it the rest is rain is you can't control where things fall. Success is success. The concept of success itself, it varies from person to person. What we want, but also what we get. We don't always get what... Me and you can go for the same goal, and we can, and me and you may have different degrees of success. You might be way more successful at it than I am. I might be way more successful at it than you are. But we might both still see success. We might both fail. We can't control the result, but what we can do is, like, we can put as many, as I call, rain buckets out there for us to increase the chances of catching the rain, because that is really what it's about. It's not about whether your batting average. It's about how prepared are you to actually go for it, and what are you willing to do, and what aren't you willing to do, and being honest with yourself about those things. I mean, one thing about limitations that isn't talked about, it's okay if you do set certain things for yourself, like, I'm not going to compromise this, this, and this. And if you're okay with what you lose out on that, there's nothing actually wrong with that. But be aware of what you're actually letting yourself, where your limits are, and try to work around them. And that's something that people, I feel, don't honestly do.
Well, and I think some of that has to do with trusting in yourself, because especially when it comes to publication, you've worked so hard to get that yes.
Yeah.
And so when that first yes comes your way, you want to jump all over it. But maybe there's some red flags. Maybe the agent is, I don't know, they've said a couple things that are just a little off. Maybe they're not great about communication right up front. Maybe they don't really answer your questions on the phone when they're offering. And there could be all kinds of things like that where you're just like, I don't know if this is the right opportunity or not. And so I think really understanding and appreciating that we all need to develop our gut instinct about everything, about our writing and about our business decisions as writers.
Mm-hmm.
That's also important too, because a common thing I see over and over and over are people who are so glad that they finally have a contract of some kind or an offer, that they ignore those warning signs. They ignore the red flags, and they just say yes. And don't get me wrong, sometimes saying yes and taking the leap, it's a great thing. But other times, you really have to make good decisions about your product and your business. You put a lot of time and energy into something, and you want to make sure that you're making partnerships. And a lot of that comes down to, again, like trying to do your research as much as possible up front. But yeah, so I mean, definitely we need to work around limitations when it makes sense.
Yeah.
I think for me, I think everyone has a lot of fears about stuff.
Oh, totally.
I have this really strange relationship with the word regret, in that I don't like it and I don't want to have any. So I constantly challenge myself on my path, on my decisions, and on my fears. So if an opportunity comes my way and my first reaction is to say no, I have to ask myself, okay, are you saying no because you're afraid to do this thing, or are you saying no because it's the wrong opportunity? And I've sort of made it a practice that if it's the first one, I say yes.
Yes. No,
it's so hard. It's so hard sometimes, because I mean, you've got to do things that are maybe super difficult, and you're putting yourself out there and you feel completely vulnerable. But the reality is that's how you grow. That's how you get things. That's how you learn you're stronger than you thought you were before. And ultimately, your writing is going to become stronger. Your business sense is going to become stronger, and you're going to become a more confident and competent writer. So, it all works out. But facing fear is always a difficult thing to do.
Well, okay, so me personally, I have a very similar relationship with regret. And for me, ironically, it was a girl I had a crush on in high school. I didn't go for it, and I still regret it. Well, no, you look, but it was a good learning experience for me, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I looked at it like, for me personally, it was like, okay, I could have, and later on, I definitely could have. If I played my cards a little differently, that could have been, who knows what that could have been. But I learned it's like, I never want to feel this way ever again. So I would rather have, I'm hoping my life that I will make a million mistakes. I've made some doozies, let me tell you. But I will have no regrets, or very little regrets. Because it's not what you do that you regret, it's what you don't.
Well, and I think, too, mistakes, that's another way where we can switch the mindset and turn them into something very positive. Obviously, no one likes to make mistakes. No one likes to fail. That sucks. It feels terrible. But if you can switch the way that you look at these things and instead do as you've done and basically see it as an opportunity to learn, then mistakes aren't necessarily all bad. Mistakes are how we grow. That is how we evolve. And in that sense, mistakes are also necessary. So it kind of helps us move past the whole self-doubt, self-blame psychology loop that can really bog us down when we do make a mistake or when we do fail.
Yeah.
It's just to look at it as that opportunity to learn, okay, what did I learn from this? This is good. I'm going to carry this forward, and I'm going to do things differently next time.
Well, yeah, and that's pretty much the I find, like, these are very simple things, but I find, like, as I get older, these become more and more important because for me, it's just like the opportunities I've allotted myself have simply come from the fact that I've been open to this, and I've also learned how to say no. That I think is a very underrated skill. You need to.
That's a big one.
Yeah, because
it's when those opportunities are not, the risk reward is not there, or you have to decide where your time goes.
Yeah.
And if you say yes to everything, then you're not writing your next book. You're not focusing on the things that are most important. So you also, absolutely have to be able to say no.
Yeah, no is, it's a simple little word. It takes some guts to say, though. It really does. I find that's a big one. Last thing we're talking about is I always make it a point now to look at my comfort zone and try to get out of it. We're all at our best when we're a little uncomfortable. We just are. It's just the way it is, because that discomfort forces growth, right? And when you let yourself become comfortable, you stop growing. It's like the water has now become fully the shape of the case it's in, and you get nothing new.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So for me, like I said, this year, my discomfort is I'm moving to BC, like, within a couple months. That's, for me, it's because I feel like I've hit that comfort point where it's like, okay, you know what? I'm comfortable here. I'm going through the same cycles over and over again. It's time to break the cycle and kind of see where I can go from here. And that's just a personal...
Do something new.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And grow from it. Maybe I get my ass kicked, but it's not the first time in my life I've had my ass kicked. I'm prepared for that. I'm also prepared to succeed, though. And I find the last thing a lot of us are afraid of. Most of us are actually not afraid of failure. Failure sucks, but we are all on some level or another familiar with it. It's success, I think, that scares us more because we don't know what to do with it.
Oh yeah, for a lot of people, they have a fear of success. I know absolutely. I have and still struggle with it. It's an interesting dynamic because a lot of people don't really, I think, especially when you're first starting out as a writer, like, that seems like such a far off goal. You haven't really thought about, holy cow, like, what if all these things that I dream actually come true? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And then what is the responsibility on me now that I've achieved this success to not disappoint people? And, it can be... it can unravel a person a little bit, where you're like, okay, well, maybe let's just put the brakes on a little so we don't get there so quickly. Let's put the brakes on, because I don't really want to deal with all of that new stuff, that is totally out of my comfort zone, that I've never experienced those things before. Like, absolutely, that is it's a whole nother level of fear that I think we don't necessarily think about until we start to realize that we actually are taking larger steep steps towards that end goal, and we can really see, like, where our path is heading. And I think that's when suddenly it just kind of all drops on us, like, oh wow, there is a lot that I'm going to have to deal with if I'm actually successful, if this book takes off. how am I going to do it again? I think that's another big one that a lot of writers think about, is that they're so focused on that first book and getting that first book published, and then they do, and then they're like, it was a fluke. Like, I can't do that again. I'll never make a book as good as that first one. And the reality is there's always more books, and we get better as we go. But there's this paralyzing fear that we're a one and done. We're a total fraud. We just lucked out on that first book.
Well, and going so far, actually, and it gets worse the more successful you get, because what happens is you have a conversation with your imposter. Hi, listen. Your imposter goes, "But you didn't deserve this, right? Like, who are you to be up here and have all this?" And then you recognize the fact that people have expectations of you, good ones, and they're not bad ones either. It's like, hey, you do good work. We want you to do more good work, right? Because this is great. And you're like, oh my god. And it's like, where's the water? Because I need water, lots of it. Like, where I've never and for me, the moment that happened for me, like last year, I won the Aurora for the podcast. It's like, wow,
that's great.
Yeah, it's like, how did this happen? And literally, that was in my head, because I didn't put myself for nomination or anything like that. So one day I woke up, I got an email. I get an email from Cliff. I'm like, you are a finalist. Wow. Who the heck thought I was good at this? And then
what happened there? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but the grounding part, the part that grounds you, is you realize that it wasn't one thing you did. It was the things you did that got people noticed. The fact that in my case, I am notoriously good at making an ass of myself on the air, and I'm not afraid to do it. And because of that, right? And also because I've interviewed enough people that enough people trust me, which is a very, very big thing as well. That people were like, okay, this guy is good. This is it. And I try to keep my philosophy the same, even though now, again, I'm getting sponsors for the podcast now, which is, again, for me, that's a big goal. And now I'm looking at my writing stuff. My first novel is going to be coming out soon. It's my 4th book. And I'm like, well, this is me taking another huge step, another big leap out into the business. And again,
congratulations.
Thank you. And I'm really proud of it, because I actually got to write a unicorn that actually farts rainbows. It was phenomenal. It was fun, and the novels I enjoyed it tremendously. But all that to be said, it's just one of those things is the trick when you head to handling success is just to keep doing stuff, because you're still going to fail. You're still going to go through everything you went through to get there is still part of the process when you are seeing success. What happens now, though, is more people are just paying attention to you, which is a good thing, actually, too, because that creates more opportunities.
Yeah, I think, speaking for myself, I try not to think about or let it affect kind of my thought process, the size of my audience.
Yes. No, you can't.
When Becca and I write a book, we're focused on doing the best job that we can to honor the people who have put their faith in us.
Yes.
Whether that's 5 people, 500 people, 5,000 people, 500,000 people, it doesn't matter to us. It's that, we started with the same values that we have now, and that is that we want to help other people. We want to help writers get their books out into the world and make writing a little bit easier, because as we all know, it's bloody hard.
Yeah.
So that has never changed. Our mission has never changed, and so the growth of our audience doesn't affect that in any way. I think the only thing that Becca and I really try to push ourselves to do is to always do it better than the book before, if we can. And I mean, some people may not agree with that, because of course some people have their favorites. A lot of people, the original book we wrote, The Emotion Thesaurus, is their favorite. But Becca and I try to go further and think deeper and bring more value to the table with every book that we write.
So have you heard...
And that's something that I would do the same thing in fiction. It doesn't matter what the topic would be. It's just, for me, it's important to continually push myself and push myself to try to do right by the people who believe in us.
So I'm just curious, do you know of a book called Understanding Comics by Scott Mccloud?
No. No, that one doesn't sound familiar.
That one is probably the quintessential guy, because you sound a lot like, you remind me of him in the sense, because he does the same thing for comic books. Understanding Comics is a guide to creating a comic. It's really smart. He does it as a comic, which is just, it's an amazing book. I read it because even though I write and my stick figures revolt, which is another story altogether, I've always thought it was a good idea to understand, if I'm going to write comics someday, to try to understand as much as I can from the artist's point of view as possible. Because it's smart. Because it's one of those things where it's like, well, I'm never going to be necessarily great at this, but I'm now giving myself the opportunity to at least try to bridge the gap. And if I'm making an effort to collaborate with people, it works out, right?
Absolutely.
And, right. So that's what I've learned, and now it's great. He has understanding. He talks about recreating comics in different formats, and it's almost like each book of his tries to explore a different aspect of the creation process. Now, that all said, the first one's my favorite because I feel one of the hardest thing about sequels, right? One of the hardest things about sequels is the first time you write something, you write a story, your message is probably its purest in the sense it's got the most enthusiasm. When you get to the second and the third one, intellectually it's better, but one of the things about writing that makes it really tough is the experience. We read books for the experience it gives us. Even as much as we love the information, it's better when it comes packaged with an experience to go with it. Isaac Asimov was a great essay writer because he was able to do that so very well. And I find that with sequels, that enthusiasm is difficult sometimes to maintain. Is that I mean, even though intellectually you're better, emotionally it's tapping into that source is different. Does that make sense?
I don't know. Like, I don't know that I 100% agree with you, but I think what you're getting at is that with your first book, there's like there's a rawness to it that comes from a place of pure creation, creation without craft application, or it's more navigating your intuition more so than sequels would, because as you write, the more you learn and the more you're able to bring that craft in. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sure that for some cases, I think people definitely do struggle. Like, in the case of some series, right? Long-standing series, book one, you're guns blazing. Book two, you're still good. Book three, you're like, okay, I don't know, this 12-book series, if it was a good idea, maybe it should only be 6. Like, you could have a little bit of that passion wane a bit, and it might come through in your writing. But I don't know that it depends on what we're calling a sequel. Mm-hmm. In our case, it's it's a different topic. It's the same thing but a different topic. In a lot of cases, it could be a different character in the same world, and it's a story about them. And I think in that case, like, if you really are embracing the themes that you're exploring in those novels, if they come from a place of passion, it means something to you. Each novel in its own will be something fresh.
Yes, absolutely.
It may not have that completely unrestrained passion from the first one, just because you kind of really don't know what you're doing, and you're just flying by the seat of your pants in some respects. But sequels are just about learning how to harness that better and to fine-tune it and magnify it. So I don't know that I would say that the first one is always necessarily the best one. In some ways, it might be the most creatively pure in some ways, but I don't know that has a particular weight versus other books that a person might write in the same, like, as sequels or in a series.
I actually do agree with what you're saying there. I just find, like I said, I think the rawness of creation is the thing. It's important. It's important. I think that on some level it's always there, but obviously first books are the easiest ones for that to pull off, because it's the magic of of bringing that creation to life.
Well, and I think there's no risk.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know how hard it is to get a book published. You don't know how many queries you're going to have to write. You don't know how many revisions are going to happen. You're just writing that first book, and you're loving it, and you're enjoying it. And so that is definitely, that's something that changes. You're a little wiser with book 2, book 3, book 6, book 10, whatever it is, right? You're used to that process.
Yep. Although I find that it goes. I find that sometimes with each new book, sometimes I still feel like I still don't know what I'm doing.
Sure.
Because there's.
Well, I think.
Sorry, go.
Reaches a very terrifying moment in their career, where they suddenly realize that they know enough about writing to understand just how much they don't know. And that is a terrifying moment, because it usually comes right after you start feeling good about, hey, I'm starting to get the hang of this. Hey, I think I'm starting to get good at this. Like, I think I'm starting to see how the pieces fall together. And then suddenly you realize, you'll learn something. And it's going to open your eyes to realizing, wow, how nuanced writing is and how much more there is to learn. And I find that one of two things happens at that point in time. Either people kind of break a little inside and they realize, you know what, I can't do this. This is going to take too long to master. It's going to take too long to get good enough. I'm worked so hard to get to this point. I don't think I've got it in me to keep going to try to learn it. I don't think I can do it. I think I'm gonna quit. And that's the first thing that I've seen people do. And then the second is, there's a little bit of crying and, binge chocolate eating and stuff. And then eventually it's like, okay, well, let's
get back up.
Suck it up and let's get going. Like, we're gonna figure this out a bite at a time. We're gonna get it done. And, like I said, it really is, writing is a journey about learning, which is, if you love to learn, it's a great thing. But it can be paralyzing, I think, that moment where you realize, holy crap, like, there's so much to learn and you'll never master it all. You look at people who are just incredible storytellers, and I'm sure if you sat down with them, they would say, I'm always learning new stuff. I read something that somebody else wrote and I'm like, it opens all these new epiphanies for me on how I can craft a better story, I can weave elements together, how things work together, why a certain technique works. A lot of times we do things by intuition, and then as we learn, you learn terminology for something, or you learn why stories work in a certain way because of something called structure, things like that, that you kind of do intuitively at the start, you start to have a better appreciation for, and then you really learn the ins and outs of what each one of those things is.
Which is, I think everybody hits that point. I think it's not just, I don't think this just applies to writing. I think it applies to any art form, whether it's a martial art, whether
absolutely,
it's, because everything, learning about anything, there's a discipline to it. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, there's just a discipline in how it's done. And if you want to really be good at something, you want to be, or great at something, you have to always, again, never stop learning, and you always have to go, there's always deeper places you can go. And writing in particular is, as I've gotten older / wiser, we'll leave the wiser to the debate for someone smarter than me. I've learned that writing is very often about what isn't said on the page. Mm-hmm. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's what isn't said, and the nuance of that is so tricky. I think good from great, I think, is literally in that mastering the art of show and tell.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Show and tell is one of those phrases that everyone hears, and they kind of like want to barf every time they hear it because they're so sick and tired of hearing about it. But the reality is that it's so much deeper than you first think it is. You think, okay, yeah, show it, don't tell it, I get it. But you don't understand how that filters into everything. Well, everything, every word on the page should be pushing things forward. They're not filler. It's not about painting a scene so a reader can see it. It's about adding in all of these other things that you're not just directly stating. It's all subtext. It's the emotions at work. It's the mood, symbolism, weaving in different types of backstory elements and stuff like that you don't have to directly, leave on in a big info dump. It's all of these different things where you're just choosing very carefully what you reveal to the readers And each one of those things does way more than just paint a picture. It's characterizing, and it's showing emotion, and it's doing all these different things.
Well, one of my I'm gonna go to a movie example of this. One of my favorite scenes in Empire Strikes Back is actually a very simple part. It's when the one of the minions of the Empire goes to Vader's pod to make a report. I thought this was one of the smart, because not much is said about this, but this is one of the most interesting parts of this, because it's Vader basically on his own in his pod, isolated from everybody else. It without saying a word, you knew that there was a separation between Darth Vader and the rest of the world. And when the guard came in to put his report in, right, it also showed something that you never saw from Vader up until that point, and that was a moment of vulnerability. He oddly was more. You was easier to sympathize with him, because you could tell that this was not a situation where he was ready to be Vader, right? This was him just taking a moment, and he was not quite as guarded. He was a little bit more vulnerable. He was a little bit more, just a little bit more vulnerable, right? And that was a really cool scene, and it told an awful lot about who Vader was without saying a word. And it's what
it really is amazing what can be done.
Yeah.
I love movies. Movies are just
movies. Good movies. Good movies are incredibly good at that stuff. Bad movies, not so good.
Not from screenwriters.
Yes, yeah. There's definitely something to it, and making a good movie is literally a perfect storm. I've talked to actors and directors and producers. It's literally a perfect storm of cast, crew, director, producer. It's when you see something great on film, it's magic. It truly is. But even with like storytelling, like I find that, and this is what I've started to do. I don't know if it'll be the first novel will show this, but hopefully the next novel shows this. When I describe a scene that I feel is boring but necessary, now I'm trying to look at it like, what story can I tell in that scene? Right, because if I tell the story the right way, I'm world building, but I'm also expanding upon either my characters or something else in the world. So it creates an undertone of expectation and delivery. It's like the nuances are so important, because it's not.
Well, we want to do that because it involves the reader directly.
Absolutely.
It allows them a way. Subtext allows readers a way to put puzzle pieces together, and they take information that they've learned in other scenes, things about the character, things about their past. Something happens in the current scene, and they connect the dots. And in that sense, you're making the reader a participant. And when you're making them a participant, guess what? They're going to keep turning those pages.
Well,
they're not going to want to put that book down. They're not going to want to leave that character, that story, and once they do, they're going to be thinking about your book a long time afterwards, and they're going to be stalking you to find out when the next one's out.
Yes.
So it really is important that we do think about the reader and the reading experience. It's not just about telling a great tale and, that takes them on this adrenaline ride. It's about involving them on some way, involving them emotionally, make them invested, and making them see a little bit of themselves in the situations that are happening to the characters. It can be completely different, but I think that this is where emotion is such a great facilitator, because we've all experienced different emotions, and a character can be going through something that's completely something beyond our experience as a reader, but we can identify with the emotions that they're feeling at that time, the vulnerabilities that go with the situation.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Like that's the best part of storytelling, right? Is those little things. I learned a long time ago. My very first signing, I learned a long time ago that the real secret to marketing is getting involved. And I know marketing isn't a very sexy part of the writing business, but it's the same thing. You're telling a story, right? Don't make us create a sale. Tell a story, and people will remember the story you tell. And it's true with, and I think it's true with everything. And like I said, and since I've adopted this approach, I've noticed I've created more opportunities for myself personally, but people get more out of it. Right? It's no longer about a sales pitch. It's now an experience. And
they connect to you as the author, as an individual.
Yes, right? Absolutely.
So that's really important, is to build, honestly, like marketing. A lot of people do marketing, they do the same things over and over that aren't effective and don't work. And at the very foundation of marketing is relationships, building relationships with people. And if you can figure that out and figure out how to do that, do it in a way that's organic, it feels genuine, it's authentically you, you're really going to succeed at marketing.
Yeah.
Because that really is the basis for it.
Well, I mentioned this in previous podcasts. Is I'm a big fan of pro wrestling, right? And the reason I'm a big fan of it, it's not so much the in-ring product; it's the interviews, the character work. Especially way back in the old days. I'm a big Randy Savage fan. That guy was nuts, but he believed it, and it translates. And when you believe in something, it translates to everybody. And I find I think that's also a big thing, not in terms of just marketing, but in terms of writing your story. You have to really believe in what you're saying and what you're telling, even if it's not real, right? Maybe especially because it's not real. Because if you don't invest, your audience will know it.
Well, and I think that touches on something really important, and it's figuring out your brand and being authentic and true to it in everything that you do. People struggle where maybe they write in a certain genre and they feel like an author in this genre should be like super cool or really mysterious or snarky or whatever associations they've made, that they've looked at other people in this industry and they're like, okay, well, I need to be like that person. I need to do it that way. And that's how I'm going to connect with my audience. The issue is if that's not truly who you are deep down, that is going to be quite a weight to carry over the course of a career, because you're essentially going to be two people. You're going to be you, and then you're going to be this other person that is, it's an act that you're putting on for other people. And if that is just an act, at some point in time, your audience is going to feel it. If your brand is tied to who you are, your core values, the things that you believe in, the things that you love, that you're passionate about, like that's when, your public face, whatever venue you're at, anything like that, it's going to be fun to interact with people because it really is all about you and the things that you believe in. It's not, you're not putting on a show, you're not being ingenuine in any way, you're not connecting with people on a way that you wouldn't connect with them normally. Like, it's just, it's really important to make sure that you are yourself. And honestly, like, that's what people want to connect with. When they love your story, they're not looking to have interactions with some author that is like super cool because of X. They're looking to have interactions with the author because they really connect to the story and they love the powerful storytelling and they want to find out more about them. They want to find more about what their process is, where did they come up with their ideas, what does their daily life look like, that's what they want to connect to, not, a facade.
No, absolutely no. And but there's another thing you're not mentioning that I think is important. I do believe at some point your persona, the one you project to the audience, and your authentic self merge. I think there's actually a point if you're it long enough, they become one. And if it's something you're not, it's painful. It is incredibly painful because now you've shaped your reality in a way that's something you're not, and you've forced yourself. You're not happy with yourself, and at some point you have to break that.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying is that your persona, it needs to be you.
Absolutely.
It can't be a fake you. Like, clearly, it's not going to be all of you. I mean, you're not going to bring all of your emotional baggage to the table, and absolutely. But it has to be. The core of it needs to be you. It needs to resonate with who you are and your values.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and that's all I was saying is. If it doesn't, eventually it will, and that's actually.
It will all fall apart.
Eventually, it does. It's brutal.
If it's not you, then
it's brutal. Right. That's all I'm saying. Like I completely agree with you. I learned this doing the podcast. Actually, it's like, wait, I can just be myself and it'll work out. Wonderful.
Well, and I think social media is a lot like that. When you first join a social media network, or at least for me, this is how it was. I'm like, I had no idea what to do on Facebook. I'm this green writer, and I know I have to build this thing called a platform. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't feel I'm particularly interesting in any way. So you're trying to figure out, like, how can I make friends on this thing? Like, how can I make people think that I'm interesting? And, I think at first, like, there's some growth here, right? Like,
Yeah.
I remember I would post certain things that I thought people would like, and it takes a while to sort of find your rhythm and realize, you know what, I don't need to impress people. I need to just be Angela. And the people who resonate with Angela, they're going to want to get to know Angela. And people who don't, that's okay. And it took me a while to kind of get there. But, yeah, I do know at first I was, the whole thing was, I didn't understand any of it. I didn't understand,
Right.
how to go about making a platform and having a brand. I had no idea. And I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to be me. That's what I'm going to do.
And it works out magically when you're that way. Me, I decided that I was going to have fun. I had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't going to let that stop me. And I remember my very first book signing way back in like 2004. I did a book signing. I did everything wrong in terms of building and marketing, but I remember what I did right. And the one thing I did right was the store I was doing was an aromatherapy store. It was located like in the back of a mall. So I had the owner's son print me these copy of these giant arrows, and I actually pasted them onto the sidewalk. People followed the arrows, and I never.
What was up?
What?
To see what was up.
Yeah, exactly. And I learned a very valuable lesson that day. Right? It's like, that's marketing. It's like, that's the game. I made it a game, and people participated. Right? So when I went to social media, now for first like 3 years, I didn't even touch my Twitter because that's just how I rolled. But when I actually finally got serious about figuring out social media, it's like, this fun thing seems to work. I started talking about Bailey's and ice cream. Ironically enough, that seemed to draw people in. And like I said, I just let myself embrace the fun, and I let people have fun. And again, I'm not the biggest guy on the network by any means, but I mean, I'm not small either. And I'm like, well, this seems to work. I have found my people.
Well,
right.
People have connected to something that's genuinely you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and that's the magic is figuring that out and just be. And the other big thing about marketing and being yourself is that, as we all know, marketing, running a business, it's work. It's going to be a big chunk of your day. If you really want to be successful, you have to treat your writing like a business. You need to make time for writing, but you also have to make time for all the business stuff too. And a lot of people, one reason why they get sucked into different kinds of promotion tactics is because they're looking for the easy button. They want to do something that's going to like sell 1 million books, and they don't have to put a lot of time or effort into it. Now, unfortunately, those things don't work. But one thing that we need to realize is that oh geez, where was I going with that?
I don't know.
I lost my train of thought.
No, salad finger. So go back to salad finger. No.
It was really good. We'll see if it comes back.
Oh, okay. We'll see if it comes back. You again, just based on what I've heard, because I've never met you in person, and I feel I have to amend this next year somehow, some way. I have to amend this next year. When Words Collide.
Coming to When Words Collide. There you go.
Yeah.
You'll have to meet up.
Yeah. Well, I'll look you up. I'm going to invite you to my Dr. Seuss off if you want to do that. Do you know what that is?
I don't, but I heard something about it. Like, I remember hearing it and going, Dr. Seuss, what is that about?
So do you want to hear what it is?
Sure.
So this goes back to the fun thing. I think you'll appreciate this. So I make grown-ups read Dr. Seuss in creative ways. The very first year I did it, I had You have not lived until you've heard Fox and Socks read in a Valley Girl accent, a Russian voice, a British voice, a Jewish voice. It was one of the most fun things I've ever seen in my life. So this year I did it again, but this time I had teams. I had 9 Dr. Seuss books, and I said, okay, guys, we're teams. You have to enact Dr. Seuss, and I was a prop. And I could be used as a prop with the story. So I saw an Interpretive Dance of Cat in the Hat. Oh yeah, it was phenomenal.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, right. And you're smiling. I can tell. I don't see you, but I know you're smiling at this thought. The point of this was, When Words Collide needs a couple recess panels. On Friday and Saturday in particular, they need recess panels. Because there's a lot of good information. Like you, Adam Dries, there's a lot of great people that present all the time. Susie Bedori, Randy McCharles. Like, there's a lot of people that go out there and have a lot of great information. And that's great. But if you're doing that for a whole day,
it's exhausting.
It's exhausting, right? So my panel was, there's nothing, you're not learning anything. You're playing. You're going to play for an hour, right? And when you're done playing with that hour, now you're refreshed and you can go back and learn all the cool
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah, it's recess, right? And it's also brand building for me because, again, I'm trying to have fun, right? I want to play, so let's play, right? So it fits my brand perfectly. It's authentic because I enjoy I don't mind being made a fool of. I've been made a fool of. I've made a fool of myself plenty of times. It's fantastic. But the other part about it is, I find that what I do really well with people is I give people permission, and I cut away the excuses. Like, if you want to do something, do it. So in this place, in this moment in time, play because you need to. You have to have fun. So yeah, you should come out.
Well, and that's also you understanding your audience, which is writers in this case, who are very creatively bent, and I mean, they embrace opportunities to release that creativity. I mean, that's why people dress up at the banquet. That's why you see different people playing games, role-playing games, or whatever, in the off hours or in the little cubbies and things like that. You do see people take that opportunity to be creative in different ways. Yeah. So, yeah, it's good to kind of play to that with this particular audience as it works with your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And also this will work when I write in adult novels with kids because I mean, who plays more than kids and the adults to have kids because they have to play all the time, right? And this is, again, it's a constructive way of building myself, but also giving people something that they could truly benefit from, which is, I think, the other thing about it, right? So you're invited next year.
And I think that's another really important part of marketing is when you're marketing well, you're not thinking about yourself and your goals. You're thinking about what can I do for, like, what is it do they need? How can I entertain them? What would they find valuable? What would they like to see? What problems do they have that maybe I can help them with? That kind of stuff. And when you're focused on that with your marketing, even as an author, I mean, if I've written a fiction novel and I know that it's going to be a year until my next one comes out, and, there's a bunch of people that I interact with, they've all bought my novel. How do I keep things going with them? How do I keep building that relationship so that they don't just sort of forget all about me and move on somewhere else to someone else? It's important that you still find ways to engage with your audience, even in between products. And one way that you could do that as an author is to not be afraid to recommend other books that are a lot like yours. And some people, they struggle with that concept because they're like, why would I want to send my readers to my competition? But the reality is other authors are not your competition.
No, not at all.
And it's an opportunity for you to demonstrate, A, that you care about your audience and you know that they like your book. So you think that they will probably like these other books. And you're showing that you care about something that they need, which is more things to read, things that they're not going to be disappointed with. So you can go ahead and you can say, you know what? I know if you guys like this book, you guys would probably like these other 2 books that I've read recently. You should go and check them out. The other benefit of that is that the reality is no matter how fast you and I write a book, we will never write a book faster than our readers can read. So we need to keep making sure that they feel connected to us, that they feel like we're taking care of them and their needs. It also can be beneficial because then you build relationships with other authors who have a very similar audience base as you do. And that's where collaborative marketing can go in. You can easily refer 2 people's book to your audience, and that person can go ahead and do the same thing for you because they're in the same boat. They're writing a book. It's going to take them a while. Hey, why don't you go check out this author while I'm doing that?
And if I'm super honest, that's probably the biggest benefit of my podcast for me personally. I get to interview everybody, right? And I don't have any problem recommending anybody's book because, again, I can't do that book. I can't do what you do. You offer a unique, one-of-a-kind, one in literally, 8 billion people voice. That will never, ever be duplicated again. I can't compete with that, and I shouldn't compete with that. We're not competition. You're you on me. Why shouldn't I build you up? Why shouldn't you build me up? It makes sense, right?
Well, and it really does. And like I said, I think this is one thing that writers struggle with because they're of the mindset that there's so much competition out there for their reading audience. There's so many books to read. It's true. I mean, it can be difficult to draw attention because there are so many books out there for people to read. But that's where differentiating yourself from all the other books on the shelf is really important. And you do that by understanding more about your audience, exactly who they are.
Yeah.
If you have a reader who reads fantasy, they're going to like a very specific type of fantasy. They're not going to like all fantasy.
No.
So you need to figure out, okay, I've written this particular book, and it contains these particular elements in it. That means that probably my audience are these particular type of people. What else could I learn about that particular audience? Like, what would they be interested in, and what kind of sites do they like to visit, and what kind of activities do they probably like to do based on what I know about them? And then you market directly to those people, and how you market is not promotion where it's buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. It's like, hey, I know you really like werewolf fiction, so I thought you would probably enjoy this article that I found about, this myth that happened in Romania or whatever.
Absolutely.
You tailor the content that you share online to fit that exact audience, the things that you believe that they're going to want to know more about, or they're going to maybe they want to read an interview about an upcoming movie that features werewolves, or you have done a interview with another author who's written a book about werewolves. Like, whatever it is that your audience is into, just try to build content and post stuff on social media and engage with that audience using this thing to really enjoy. And when you think in terms like that, suddenly marketing gets a lot easier. You go from, I have no idea what to say online, I have no idea what to share with people other than my book cover and a blurb and a couple reviews, to suddenly you've got this whole topic of discussion that you can both enjoy, because if you wrote a book about something, chances are you're interested in the elements that are in your book and you have a lot to say about it. So connect with the people that also are interested in that element and see where the conversation takes you.
Absolutely. I actually find the best marketing I almost had talked nothing about my books. And it's not even because it's not like a lack of modesty or anything like that. It's just I realize the books are the way to support me. What I want is people to believe in me.
Yeah.
Right? And the way to do that is to be as engaging as possible.
Well, and that's how you take someone, maybe a reader, a fan of a particular type of book, and turn them into a super fan of you, which is fantastic. And
yes.
I've been so very, very lucky with this, so very blessed to have really terrific people.
Yes.
That just really get the things that Becca and I are trying to do with our books and with One Stop for Writers. But when they connect with you and they connect with what you're trying to do and the work that you're doing, they want to see you succeed.
Absolutely.
They want to help you. They want to introduce other people to you. They want people to get to know you. You've given them value. You've helped them. You've entertained them. You write an excellent story that they couldn't stop talking about with their book club or with their friends on the phone, whatever, and they want other people to have that experience.
Yes.
So building those type of relationships is so worth it. This is why I say over and over again, like my conversation before, was that a lot of people, they engage in these, quick and promotion, spaghetti techniques of splashing the book cover everywhere and doing the buy my book promotion. But if you just invest your time to really get to know your audience and get to know what they need and what they're looking for on each platform, because that is going to be different. People who are using Twitter are maybe using it differently than they would on Facebook. And so it's two different experiences and two different ways you can kind of tweak the thing that platform exactly, but cater to them, really connect with them, find out what their interests are, and build that relationship. And I know it's a lot of work. Like a lot of people avoid that type of marketing because they feel like, I don't want to be doing nothing but marketing, and if I do that, then I'm going to be constantly on social media. I'm going to be constantly on people's blogs answering questions or commenting and trying to do all this hard work, and I'm not going to be writing my next book. And on one hand, we always want to make sure that we are writing that next book, but the investment that you put into building relationships with people is something that will last your entire career. It's not a one-and-done sale. When you build a fan of you, when you build somebody that connects with you on, an authentic level, on a genuine level, they're going to want to help you and engage with you and buy your books and share your books for as long as you write them. So it does take more time to build relationships. It's like a marriage in the sense that it's not like you meet someone and then 5 hours later you're married. Well, there is that one TV show, I guess, that's like you do that. But in real life, it mostly is, there's like a whole ritual of courting that goes on, and you gotta, there's the bumpy road. But the reality is relationships do take time.
Absolutely.
But they are so worthwhile building those relationships. It's so enjoyable to have relationships with your readers. It's not work. And like I said, having that, knowing that all those people support you, knowing that all of those people want you to do well, they want you to keep writing books, like that's a powerful thing for a writer, because it can be easy to doubt ourselves. But knowing that you have all those people out there that think good things of you, I think that really kind of keeps us going. And that also circles back to the idea that for me, I really want to make sure that every book I write, every tool I release on One Stop for Writers, that it's the best that I can do, that it's better than anything I've released before. It's the most helpful thing that I possibly can think of, so that I'm going to honor that relationship that I have with my readers or the people who subscribe to One Stop for Writers.
So, wow. This did not go the way I expected at all. I really enjoyed this. How about you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to ask this because you started with fiction. You've talked about the teaching tools you built for writers. I saw a Facebook post the other day from you that's like it's something you feel called to getting back into fiction. So are you?
Oh, for me, that is still a path that I plan to go down. It's just what happened when our book started taking off is it grew into this whole massive thing. Our blog exploded, our books exploded, and Becca and I had to make a decision. Are we going to try to juggle fiction and nonfiction and running businesses and speaking and all this other stuff, or do we want to focus on teaching and helping writers right now and doing a really good job with that? And then hopefully at a certain point in time, things will, kind of move forward on their own enough that we can pull back a little and then get back into our writing. And that's what we decided to do. And I have no regrets about that.
No.
I definitely read fiction. I'm interested to see what it will be like for me because I've learned so much since I stopped.
Yeah. And
so it'll be kind of interesting to see like what a book for me looks like. I think that's also a little bit paralyzing as well because when you are viewed as an authority on writing, there's kind of their bar is a little bit higher, I think, on your fiction. That'll be a little bit of a mental hurdle for me. Yeah. I imagine that when I go back to fiction, I will actually probably write in a genre that I've never written before. And I'll do that on purpose because it's almost like giving yourself permission to make mistakes. Because it's a new genre, it's not something you've done before, you're just having fun, you're reconnecting with that creative side of you. And I think that that's probably what I will do. It's just I've never done before, because then I'm not comparing a product that I've done now to a product that I wrote before, and all that kind of stuff.
There's a little bit of hello imposter, my old friend there. I think a little bit on that. I'm gonna close the official part of the interview with my first kindergarten assignment. I think you might appreciate this. I remember my first kindergarten assignment was we dipped a marble in paint, and we had a box, and we would roll the marble in the box, right? Just wherever it went, if it went, it went. And when it was over, we had this work of art. It was my first ever art piece. And it was beautiful, but it was different. Every marble was a little bit different. And it took me until literally last year to figure out how valuable that lesson actually really is. The lesson that I learned from that is it's okay to make a mess. In fact, you probably should. My first young adult novel I'm currently working on is a giant mess. I have everything and the kitchen sink in there. I'm just throwing... I'm spaghetti... Like, this part I'm being a bit... I know what the general story is, but I'm spaghettiing as much of this stuff as I possibly can, too, early. Getting all the ideas out, the good, the bad, the ugly. Give myself permission to do it, because no one's going to see this draft of me. I can take it... Right? I'm going to take it. I'm going to cut it into a zillion pieces. I'll say, this works, this works, this works, this works. Let's strengthen the middle. Let's make the middle a little less soggy. Let's make it solid as the beginning and the end is. And then we'll worry about then the next draft is going to be, okay, this is the draft that now maybe somebody might see. Maybe I do one more draft after that to make sure it might see. But that first draft, it's as messy as I possibly can. So I guess for me over to you, make the biggest mess you can. Have fun.
Well, I think that's why I would choose a totally different genre. It's an experiment.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the biggest things one big struggle when you go from nonfiction to fiction is writer's block. And, there's real debate as to whether or not it exists or not. But I know for me, in the past, one of the things that helped me grow considerably as a writer is that Becca, who's my co-author, her and I took a year. And we studied book after book after book of writing. So we would both read Stephen King's On Writing, and then we would discuss it. And then we would read Donald Moss's Breakout Novelist, and then we would discuss it. And we worked through so many different iconic writing craft books. And it was great because if there was something that I didn't quite get, chances are Becca got it. And if there was something that Becca was having trouble with, chances are I got it. And so we were able to really accelerate our growth by taking a year off to do that. The downside is when we came back to writing, it was so hard because our brains were so filled with theory now. It was like, oh my gosh. It's kind of like the first time you take a golf lesson. And before then, you just kind of walked up to the ball and you swung your club at it and like whatever happened. It was sort of intuitive. But after you've had a lesson, you're like, okay, where are my shoulders? Okay, how far apart are my feet? Am I too close to the ball? And there's all of these things running through your head that kind of paralyze your ability to get words down on the page. And I think that it would probably be the same thing for me as far as just taking so much time off from writing and looking at writing in a different filter, and that is through, really strong writing craft and focusing on technique. I think I need to create some distance from that, and probably the best way to do it is to write something that I've never written before, something that is fun, something that is probably just for me, no pressure on it to turn into a published work. If it goes that route and I feel like there's something there, I'll keep working on it, but just to sort of give myself the opportunity to experiment. I think the other reason why I'll probably do that is that I imagine I'm going to have to experiment a bit to see what I want to write again. I know I had to do that the first time around. I started with picture books, which anyone who writes picture books is having a good old laugh at Angela now, because we all know that they are not. They're very, very hard to write.
Yes.
So that's where I started, and then I tried chapter books, and then I tried middle grade, and I tried YA, and I realized that my sweet spot was kind of in the middle grade area. That's kind of what I really, that was my jam. But I don't know that that's what I want to write now. I'm going to have to decide, because I've grown a lot in that time. My kids are older. I may decide that I want to move to adult fiction. Maybe I want to write mystery, or maybe I want to try a full-blown fantasy or dystopian. I don't know.
It sounds
so. It'll be fun to experiment.
It sounds to me you're wise enough to realize that your voice changes, right?
For sure.
Yeah, you're wise enough to realize that, and so you're going to try to see what that voice is now before you make a commitment one way or the other. That's what it sounds like to me. Am I reading that right?
Oh, for sure. And to me, it's exciting.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I will need to do is invest a lot of time into reading whatever I think that I want to write. I'm going to have to read a lot of books in that genre, whatever I decide to experiment with. Just, it's not that I don't read now. I do, but reading is not fiction, more than fiction, and so I would want to take like just a big chunk of time and just devour as many books as I could in that genre.
No, fair enough. I wish you luck. Sounds like you're a little excited about this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, when the time is right, it's going to be great.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. I think, Miss Angela, we have an interview here. What do you think?
I think so.
Okay. So why don't you promote what recently came out for you, or what's coming, and whichever is closer to fruition. If what's coming up is closer than what was just released, talk about that, and how people can find you.
Well, people can find me multiple places. I am kind of all over social media. I do really enjoy it, Facebook and Twitter especially. I have a blog that I run with Becca Mccloud. It's called writershelpingwriters.net. And Becca and I have been doing that now for over 10 years, probably 12 or maybe even closer to 15. I'd have to think about it. But there is a metric ton of advice on writing on that blog. So if anyone struggles with anything, especially anything description related, show, don't tell, that's kind of what we're known for. There's just tons and tons and tons of information there. Becca and I also have a second site called One Stop for Writers. This is a subscription site that we run with Lee Powell, who is the creator of Scrivener for Windows. If people use that software, excuse me. And there we have all of our thesauruses. We have 6 different books. One has 2 different editions. But as far as our thesauruses go, Becca and I are working on, I think, the 16th one now. We have a lot more topics than we do have books, and it's just simply because it takes so much time to create books. It takes us time to go through them, and then also not all of them are candidates for books, but they're really excellent areas to explore. And so we put them all together at One Stop for Writers so that writers are spending less time trying to figure out what they want to write and just actually doing the writing themselves. One Stop for Writers also has a lot of different custom tools that we built with Lee. Things that as writers ourselves, we know what we really wish existed so that they would make writing stories so much easier. So we've gone ahead and made those things. One of my favorite tools is called the Character Builder. And this is something that integrates all the different databases of information that we've collected over the years on characters. So things like character emotion, character emotional wounds, character motivation, positive traits, negative traits, skills and talents, physical features, all the different things that a person needs to know in order to build a compelling character. And we've hardwired it all into a hyper-intelligent tool where it prompts you with information as you build your character's backstory, family life, their different goals, and it means that you'll build a really deep character in about half the time, because it is always going to prompt you with more information based on the decisions that you're making, and it just makes you have a really complete character so much faster. The other thing I love about this tool is it has a character blueprint that we've created where there's certain pieces of information that you'll brainstorm as you're building a character, that those pieces of information will actually make the critical elements of a character arc. And so it will actually, based on the information that you've chosen for your character, will show what their character arc is going to be in the story. So what their goal is, how they're going to go about achieving it, what's going to hold them back, what they have to move past internally in order to achieve that goal. And so it's just like this wonderful piece of information that is kind of your North Star as you're writing your story. So that's one of our newest developments at One Stop for Writers, and that's onestopforwriters.com. There's a free trial, so we just launched that, which is really exciting. So we want people to build characters and try all the different tools that we have there. Becca and I also released recently the Emotion Thesaurus 2nd edition. We had this at When Words Collide, and our original had 75 different emotions, where it looks at the different ways a character might express that emotion through body language, thoughts, visceral sensations, dialogue cues, different things like that. And the 2nd edition, it's been expanded to 130 different emotions, so it's almost double the size. And it was so rewarding for Becca and I to be able to go back to that book and look at it again. It was the first book that we wrote. It's a self-published book. All of our books are. And so it was really nice for us to go back and kind of expand on what everyone's favorite book was, because we've learned so much in that time, and there were a lot of emotions that, we probably should have included the first time, but we weren't really sure how people would take a book like this. We didn't know if it would resonate or not. So yeah, it was really great to go back to that. So that's probably our newest book.
All right.
And that was my conversation with Angela Ackerman. Angela is one of the great teachers of the writing industry. Definitely check out her work. She does an incredible teaching seminar. She teaches an awful lot in regards to just the craft itself. Probably one of the best people you can learn from. Whether you're a beginner or a master, definitely check her out. Angela, it was a pleasure for you to come on my show. You're welcome back anytime, and I look forward to meeting you in person next year. But, unfortunately I'm not landing this on a great note. While I was moving, Cheesing Publications came out with their mess and debacle going on here. It's not the only Canadian publisher this year that's come out with some very, very shady business practices. And I'm not going to comment about the specifics of it, not because I don't think it's important, but rather I kind of wanted that there are other people more impacted personally, specifically here. Some of the readings and tellings I've been reading in the last week or so have kind of made me realize a couple things, and that's what I'm going to talk about here. And the first is, unfortunately, that this is a far more common thing than is let on, I think, in this industry. Writers are generally very insecure in this sense that we have this talent, but for the large part, there's no quantifiable way to measure. I tell a story. What does that mean? Even though we are literally a creature that thrives on stories, doesn't matter who we are. Define worth in that in terms of financially putting food on the table is not easy. And we all struggle for it. And we all have to have a certain level of audacity. But once we get it, it's like, oh my God, we're recognized and famous. Now what? And this kind of attitude I remember, for me, the first time I've seen this kind of thing, although not to the same degree, was when I was working for the writer I was working for. Not completely their fault, and this needs to be really emphasized here. My situation was different than Cheesine and Edge and a lot of these other publishers have been coming out, like in terms of payments, rights. None of that stuff happened, but the lack of payments thing did with me. I remember after my first month working for this author that payments stopped. Now some of that simply was just circumstances beyond control. There was just a lot of that going on. But there is something to be said about value. And what I want to bring up here is when you stop paying somebody, it's really easy to fall into a habit of not appreciating what someone's bringing to the table. There are a lot of people that had a lot of books, advances, never saw money because they could get away with it. Again, maybe there were some poor financial decisions being made in these situations. Maybe it really is a struggle. It is. Balancing these books is a bitch. It's not. The business aspect of publishing is very tough, very, very tough. But at some point, you have to pay the people. You have to see value, and it's not about it's not always timely. I mean, I've certainly been late on paying my own people. I've hated it when it's happened. I try to be open about it, but it does happen. Life does get in the way sometimes of doing what you're supposed to do or what you feel obligated to do. But I'm very anal about paying my people because, frankly, I remember what it's like waiting weeks and weeks and weeks for a check. And not for very much. And you're like, well, when am I going to see it? And like I said, my situation wasn't as bad. I had a roof over my head guaranteed. But other things, not so much, but I did have at least that. My But it's one of those things where I can recognize when somebody feelings. I remember one reading I was reading about how you love these people, yet in spite of everything they've done. Yeah, because you don't get paid, you feel devalued, and when the expectations, when it's all said and done, I mean, the fact that you put in your time, you're there, day in, day out, doing what you're supposed to do, and not see any money, when it's all said and done, it's brutal. It's crushing, and it happens far more often in the industry. So I got a couple things. To the people that were treated well, no one's entirely bad. No one's entirely one-dimensional. The people that were treated good, they were treated good. And honestly, if you were one of those people, you should just take a compliment. Maybe you saw a better side to those people. No one's all bad. To the rest that didn't get to see that, keep going, keep writing, keep creating. Just because that fell through, your dreams are still there. There's still a lot of good publishers in Canada. There's still a lot of good people doing this day in and day out. While in this moment it's terrible, it's also an opportunity, because they're gone and something else will take their place. Maybe it'll be Renaissance Books, maybe it'll be Mirrorwell Publishing, maybe it'll be Bungerin Press, maybe it'll be Taiki, maybe it'll be someone else. I don't know. I do know, though, that, this will pass. Just keep going with your dreams. Keep doing you. And that will do it for this episode of Just Joshing. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so in a number of different ways. Support my sponsors, IndieImprint.com. Get Your Ass to Mars is available now. It's out and about. Check out their site, IndieImprint.com, for more details. Subscribe to the podcast. iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Podomatic. Check it out. YouTube channels, Joshua Pantellaresco. My Instagram and Facebook and Twitter is at jpantellaresco. Facebook, I should say, is Josh Pantellaresco, author, podcaster. My books, Watcher Stormance and Wandering God, are available through Mirrorwell Publishing. Check them out, mirrorwellpublishing.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, let someone know, okay? Stay inspired, keep going, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Josh.